is not strict, but let me go ahead and click the Go Live button on the YouTubes. All right, we're live. So this is our first open Delta RS development meeting. I figure we're going to try to do these every couple weeks while there's some significant development going on the Delta RS library or the bindings on top of it. The agenda is in our Slack channel, which can be linked from the GitHub README or from delta.io. First up that I had on the list, and Neville is traveling, so hopefully his connection stays pretty strong. Just to share how some of the Arrow writer support that we need is going. So Neville, you
cool.
are
here. I am. Okay, thanks. Hi everyone. So I've been working on the Arrow parquet write support, mainly for nested lists, structs, and combinations thereof. The current writer, well, before I started with this work, only really supported primitive types and very basic lists. So it's been extending all of that work. I've worked on it for the past few months now, because there's been quite a lot of edge cases to cover and deal with, you know, the different semantics between how Arrow extracts the data and how parquet interprets it. As of this past Sunday/Monday morning, I opened a pull request that's really sort of the penultimate work getting the right support working. So the pull request enables calculating the nesting or the definition levels for arbitrarily nested list types and a combination thereof. So it's the one step that I was missing before fully enabling, you know, nested write support. So I'm nearly there. I'm expecting that in the next 2 weeks we should have write support in the parquet library.
The pull request is this 9240. Let me open it up real quick. This is compute nested list definitions.
Yes, that's the one.
Okay. Good, then I shared the right one in Slack. Is there anything that we should do to help, Neville?
So it's mainly getting the pull request reviewed. I've added as much detail as I could, but I'm still going to add some more to make it easier for non-parquet experts to also review it. Just looking at the logic, it does get a bit intricate when it comes to dealing with, you know, lists on top of lists, but it should be something that one could be able to follow. So just going through the pull request, if there's any parquet experts in the chat or who've got some time, go through it. You can probably suggest some things. So what I said in the pull request was that because I had to iterate on a few different implementations to get it right, I haven't done like optimizations like bit packing the masks, etc. It also makes it easier to review. You know, instead of looking at the number 7 and figuring that it's 111 or something, it's easier for you to just see true kind of thing. So once we've gone through that, then I can start optimizing it. But yeah, I think as many hands as possible looking at the pull request. There's also a few other smaller stuff that I'll be opening more pull requests for during the course of the week, but some of them relate to the right side of things. One of the challenges I've had was that it's quite difficult to test that you're writing correctly if you don't have read support. So outside of using Spark and, you know, outside of using PySpark and PyArrow to read files, I've been working also on some of the read support so that I can just make sure that the parquet implementation is round tripping correctly.
Gotcha. Christian, were you going to say something?
Yeah. So I was going to start with, sorry, joined a little bit late. Caught up on the end of Neville's conversation there, and I just wanted to validate. I've still been catching up on kind of the Arrow parquet crate side of things, and I just posted in this meeting in the chat window the writer that I'm targeting now, which is the Arrow writer, which instantiates a parquet writer internally. And I'd like to just kind of throw that out there for Neville while we're on the call. This is the right thing for me to be targeting at a high level to execute parquet writes. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Thank you.
There's still a few things missing, which I suppose will be the work that I'll be doing after the write support. So you'll notice that it's very heavily tied to a file on the file system. We need to make it more generic so that the underlying parquet writer that it creates ultimately allows you to write to a bunch of bytes instead of writing to a concrete file. But yes, that's the correct one that you should be targeting.
I feel like I could work around this at present though, because from what I'm seeing in the arrow writer, it looks like it does take an iterator. So rather than going, I know the documentation says I need to go through that value iter that's provided that wraps a buffer reader a file. But I feel like I should be able to do this without actually having a file, right? I could create my own iterator on an in-memory buffer of JSON values and pass that instead of a value iter. Does that sound?
Yes, on the read side, it's fine. You can do that. It's more on the destination. So the destination has to currently be a file. If I remember correctly.
So it would not support S3 currently, is what you're saying?
Yes. So in order to support S3, concretely, we need to support passing anything that's effectively bytes or that implements the
stood IO, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense, and I expected that constraint as well. So I think we're good there.
Cool. Anything else, Neville?
Nothing else. Thanks.
Cool. Well, what I was hoping we would be able to cover next, and maybe screen sharing isn't working well for me. QP, would you be open to sharing your screen and just opening up the discussion that we've had on the low-level rate API from the Delta RS Lite?
Yeah, I can try to see if it works for me. Screen share.
Yeah.
Can you see?
We can.
So, yeah, I'm going to jump into the discussion. Discussion. So we have Tyler opened this discussion here about the write support. So I guess I don't know if everyone have go through this yet, but I can do a quick overview on what the proposal is. Basically,
I think it's worth in the overview. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, basically we don't have any write support in Delta RS right now, and we are at a stage where we should be able to start implementing the write support, including transaction log commit. So, what the high level view we have right now is to first implement a set of low-level APIs. So if we look at the Delta protocols, which is open here, there are a set of actions that's defined for the transaction logs. So the idea is to first implement these set of actions, for example, add files, remove files, change metadata, adding commit transaction identifiers, all that stuff. All these low-level APIs will first implement them, and then we can build higher-level abstractions on top of them. And with these low-level actions, we should be able to have a fully working end-to-end demo with Rust, with pure Rust code. So what I suggested is to use the Scala implementation as a inspiration to see what kind of API we can design to work with a transaction. For example, I gave a pretty rough dummy code here, which is basically with a table object, we can start a new transaction. And with the transaction object, we can then invoke these low-level write actions APIs to, for example, add a list of files to the transaction log. And then we can remove files, we can add some other metadata. And then at the end, we can do a transaction commit. which will write all the actions, batch all the actions, and commit a new transaction log to the data table. And so this is a rough example that I gave, but I'm happy to see what other people think about it.
Yeah, no. So just to be the first to respond, so I feel like what you wrote here makes perfect sense to me as an overall API. But then as I'm thinking about our incremental deliverables, I'm thinking like starting a new transaction to begin with is not going to do anything special. In the long road, it's going to interact with, a transaction coordinator that can kind of service between multiple simultaneous potential transaction writers. But we're going to ignore that at first, right? Just to get kind of the baseline in place.
Yeah, I think for the initial implementation, we should target single writer support instead of multi-writer,
Right.
So there will be no coordination.
Gotcha. Okay.
With how you've sketched this out, QP, could you? I mean, at the transaction commit is when we'd actually be doing a write, but with the add file, remove file, those would be paths of some form that have to go in the transaction log, wouldn't they?
Those will be path.
Like a dot parquet, for example.
Yeah. Yep.
That's going to be encoded in the transaction log verbatim as a dot parquet, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so
Yep, that makes sense. So it would
if
need
this
to
was
be
an S3 thing, like if I had an S3 object, would the low-level API be I pass a URI in here, like an S3 URI, or
I think
in the advocate?
This is up for discussion. I was
Okay.
thinking it's a path relative to the table.
relative to the table, right?
That's what I'm
relative
thinking.
path.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I think this is up to discussion. Like,
Yeah,
I don't have a strong opinion on this.
Well, that's what I was thinking as well. So if you create a Delta table that's rooted at a certain S3 path, then I would expect all of the add files to be relative to that Delta table path.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Should we handle a case where somebody, where some other party is trying to leverage this same API and chooses to use absolute paths instead of relative paths, or would that create more problems than it's worth?
But I was actually going to ask if Denny would be able to chime in, or maybe Ben is familiar with what the Scala library is doing. Like, is it even valid to have files outside of the table space in the transaction log?
It is not.
That
Yeah.
part's not
So, yeah. So you basically, it's okay. I personally think it's okay to use relative paths because the transaction log is only locked at the table, the root table as it is, anyways. So, I could see us actually confusing people more.
That makes sense. I made a quick note. I'm just keeping some notes to add to the discussion on GitHub, just so everybody knows.
Sure. No, makes sense. Makes sense.
Are you commenting on the GitHub page? Nope.
Yeah, I will be. I'm spooling up these. I'm queuing the writes.
Anyway, I think when we do the transaction commit, that's when we're gonna grab the next transaction ID and then try to commit it. That's where we do the optimistic write. And I think for the first iteration, we will just do it with the local file system without S3, and then.
Well, we have to, right?
Yeah. Well, there's also ways to do it with S3, but I think that's we can do it later.
Well, I mean, if I understood the previous conversation with Neville, we don't have support yet to provide a writer that writes to S3.
I guess we will have to write to a buffer and then move that buffer to S3, right? So not directly from parquet crate to S3, but from parquet crate to a buffer, and then from buffer to S3. So we'll have to do the bridging ourselves if we want to do S3's demo.
My understanding from what you were proposing last week when we had chatted a little bit about this privately QP was that this API would know nothing about parquet file writes, and this would just be taking, like when you say add file a.parquet as an example, that would be an a.parquet file would be somewhere already there. Like it would have to already be in the table space on disk or in storage.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
And
like the way I'm interpreting that is the discussions about the native cloud or the cloud storage providers is sort of moot in that would be a different set of APIs to actually put the file, like put data into a file in S3 as an example.
I see what you're saying.
Then we would use the Delta transaction writer to reference that.
So basically, I think I hear what you're saying, Tyler. In this case, like the paths might be in S3 that we're adding here to the Delta transaction log within this transaction scope, but it's actually doesn't matter at all to the transaction log. The transaction log is just updating the transaction log wherever it happens to live. Yeah, that makes sense.
And
our simple test would be like you'd create you'd have a Delta table on disk somewhere, and you would go put a parquet file there, which from the Delta standpoint doesn't exist until you would go through this transaction and actually add that to the transaction log.
Yep. That makes sense.
And
so to me, it's like two steps. We get the transaction log writing part correct, and then we can work on the actual writing the parquet bits after Neville's done with his work.
So just a question, just because that's the most uneasy part for me is the S3 part. Neville, is there a ticket that's tracking that I can follow for like allowing to pass in a writer that writes to S3 or to write to S3 directly, whatever it happens to be?
Let me find one. There's a PR that's semi-abundant by someone where they were implementing the ability to write to a memory buffer. So let me find that one because I was going to use that as a start and then abstract away the file system after that. I'll post it in the chat now.
Okay, thank you.
Am I still sharing my screen?
No.
Okay.
You are not. You are safe. And we've got Florian who's joining us. Welcome, Florian.
Hello.
So QP, is there anything else on the or anybody else? I mean, this topic is open for discussion, but anybody else that wanted to discuss the transaction API? Going once, going twice. Okay, we are just to time check for everybody. I think I had scheduled this originally, for 30 minutes. So we've got 10 minutes left. We don't have to use the 10 minutes. I wanted to leave the last part of the meeting open to open PRs or bugs or things that we wanted to discuss that might merit a synchronous discussion. Bueller, anybody?
One thing that I think it's worth working on, that I don't think it's checked yet, is we have this golden test data set prepared from Databricks, and I don't think we are passing all of them for read. I tried a bunch of them, and there are low-hanging fruits that we can, looks like a lot of them are failing for the same problem, and it seems like a pretty quick fix. So I think it's worth spending some time to get us passing all the tests for the golden data set and make sure that's part of the CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah, I think that's certainly worthwhile. Can you open up a topic branch that would be failing with failing tests? Yeah. I'm assuming you've got some code already written.
I don't, but
No.
I think that's something we should.
How do you know they were failing?
Oh, I tried it for some test tables.
I see. Yeah, for those of you that may not have seen the pull request, we've got this hard-coded Azure storage account, and we've got a hard-coded Delta S3 bucket that are both in accounts that I control. And I populated both of those with the golden data set from the connectors repo, I think it is. So they're not present on disk for local development, but that's pretty easy to just do a get submodule if we want to go that route. But they are at least in the storage buckets for testing.
Depending on how much, sorry, go ahead. I want to reserve any of my remaining comments until everybody has very useful things to talk about done.
Okay. So Neville asked about medium term keeping the test running in Tyler's S3 account. Yes. I actually wrote a blog post about this, which I can share later. But the S3 account that is running for those, it has a maximum budget of $5 a month. If we somehow ever exceed that budget for just storing S3 objects for the golden test, I'll be very, very surprised. Yeah, so basically, unless Denny has something official for the Delta project as a whole, I'm perfectly happy to keep hosting these. They won't be disappearing anytime soon.
Right, and if we do run into issues, just let me know, and then we'll figure something out.
Okay, cool.
All right, Christian.
Okay,
what
yeah.
You wanted to say?
Yeah, so Neville, the file you linked here, just doing a quick peek at it. It's a little different than the API I was expecting. I was thinking there would be like a trait that would be passable, that would do the right. It's fine that it's not. So basically, what I'm reading here is instead
Could you maybe share your screen, Christian, to show
Yeah.
us what you're reading?
Yeah, I can.
We've shared a number of links at this point to where I'm
Let
not sure
me-
what you would be referring to.
Yeah, let me see. I'm not used to this thing here. How do I share
It's
my
bottom left.
Bottom
There's
left.
3 buttons.
more actions?
That's
Next to that chat and the hand, the hand that you raised, there's a screen there where you can share a screen. Well, at least on my side, should be the same for all of us.
Oh, okay, I see it. Yep. Oh, it's only letting me. Okay, your entire screen, application window. It's probably this one. Where do I have it? I think it's this one. Arrow 8796. Is that what you guys are seeing right now? Okay, perfect. Okay, so actually, maybe this is not the best. Okay, files changed. So I have not looked at the files changed yet. So I don't know. I don't have a good bearing here. Let me start just by saying,
what did you want?
I was expecting to be able to pass in a trait, or basically a struct that implements a trait, right? That would do the right. But it looks like the support that's added by this PR is more in the direction of writing directly to an in-memory buffer, which is fine, I think, because I can write to an in-memory buffer and then handle the file right to S3 myself. But I just wanted to make sure that I was on the same page, because where we were going with conversations, I thought it was more in the realm of passing in a writer instead, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can answer that. So there's a couple of constraints that are quite challenging to solve. So one of them is that one of the trade conditions is that you have to support try clone, which makes it difficult for you to do it arbitrarily. So this PR sort of goes halfway there, because when you can supply just a buffer, a vec buffer, the benefit there is that in this PR, the try clone constraint has actually been abstracted out or moved out, making it easier. So what I would practically do here on this PR is that I'm gonna take it as it is, and then instead of passing in a vec, I'm going to then pass a trait that has a fewer restrictions than what we currently have. So this is sort of the foundation to get to the point where we pass a struct, a trait, something that implements the right trait. So yes, this is when working on this PR, it's not going to be the end of it, but I'm going to take it further so that we can be able to pass in anything effectively as long as it can write data.
Okay, gotcha. I think that gets me as far as I need to be right now. Thank you.
So it doesn't have to be a buffer, right? As long as the you pass in a thing that implements the parquet writer trait, which after this PR gets merged, it will only require write and seek trait, and it doesn't really matter what this struct is doing underneath, as long as it implements the write and seek trait, and then this struct can be writing to memory or S3 or whatever.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay. Yep. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Any open pull requests we want to discuss, or bugs, since we're coming to the end of our scheduled time?
Not on the error crate. It's just the main one with write support where I asked those who have time to have a look at. I'll just post it in the chat now.
Okay. One thing I wanted, maybe with Neville and QP here, we've got this open pull request for Tokyo, bumping Tokyo to 1.0, which QP and I already had some discussion around this in the pull request. This is pull request 76 on Delta RS, just so you know. But this is dependent on an arrow pull request to upgrade to Tokyo 1.0. And I'm curious, QP, from your perspective, like how important is it for you or to you that we get to Tokyo 1.0?
Not very important. But it's nice to have, and some of the if we want to use newer versions of some of the SDKs, we will have to go up 1.0. But right now, it's not a burning issue. Okay.
The impression that I got from the arrow pull request, which is arrow pull request 9230, which I'll drop in our Slack channel, is that we might not see this get merged for a while.
Yeah, we will have to wait for that PR.
Yeah,
I haven't followed the discussion around it. Do you know why, QP? Is it because of the merge of the new release or something else?
There's some discussion about how to do version pinning within the cargo TOML file. I think that was the main discussion that's remaining. But the PR itself, I think there's no objection.
What was not clear to me, Neville, is there's a comment from Alan B, and I'll link that directly in the Slack, saying that we should merge this, or that it would be great to merge after 3.0 ships. I don't know enough about the Arrow development timelines, but if Tokyo 1.0 doesn't get into Arrow for the next few months, then QP's pull request is probably just going to stagnate while we change Delta RS, because we have a lot of development planned in the next few months.
So I think to the extent that we'll still be linking to the ongoing, the Get branch, then it's fine. I think Andrew was speaking more from we sort of had a merge freeze, if I can call it that, where we weren't merging any pull requests. But that has been resolved now, because I see that there's a bunch of pull requests that have been merged. Because typically once the release maintenance branch has been cut, we can still continue with development as usual. So I'll chime in on the discussion and see what the versioning issue is. I mean, we had a breaking change in the parquet format live crate, where we sort of upgraded from version 2.6 to 2.7 of the format, and it broke a couple of people's code. So I think the concern was around that, but we resolved that. So I'll look into why we're being pedantic about pinning versions.
From a release standpoint, the thing that's important to understand, and this is really for everybody that's contributing, we can release new versions of the Python binding, and we currently do. I mean, this is what QP cut, I think 021 over the weekend, with pinning Rust dependencies to SHA-1s or branches from Git. In order to release the Delta Lake crate, so the native Rust binding, we can't have any references to Git-based dependencies. Everything has to be a real release dependency on crates.io. So if we wanted to be on Tokyo 1.0, for example, we could continue releasing the Python crate or the Python wheel and continue developing with Delta RS for some of the downstream projects that we have here at Scribd. But nobody would be able to depend on the native Rust binding in any sort of release standpoint. They would have to point to our Git for everything. And to me, that's the big trade-off, is that we can't cut a crates.io release until we can point to an actual Arrow released crate.
So effectively about 3 more months. At the very least. Then.
Oof.
Yeah. I think that's fine. So the Tokyo 1.0, the issues that are there, or the questions around pinning, we can resolve that probably by the end of this week and then get that merged in. But it means that then we'll have to really wait for version 4.0 of Arrow and Parquet.
Okay. I guess that's going to be that. I'll make sure to update the README accordingly.
Yeah, I think in general, there should be an appetite. If anybody wants to use what's this, Delta RS, there should be an appetite to pull from Git in the short term, because at least what I've seen is that a few relatively big projects that are moving a bit quickly are using Arrow and Parquet from Git instead of the released version.
Okay.
Because the problem is really that with the other language implementations, there's quite a lot of release work that has to be done. It's not as smooth as we do with Rust. So as a result of that, there isn't that much appetite to do releases more frequently. But there are some people who are interested in helping out with that. So I think if we can get the C++ and Java side of things like very smooth, we could probably even see like a 2-month or even 6-weekly release cycle.
Whoa, Neville, that's really fast. I didn't actually put it together that the release cycle for the Rust stuff was pinned to all of the other language implementations in Arrow. That does clear a lot of things up for me.
Yeah, they all share the same version, right?
Yes.
All right then.
We also had this discussion with Delta RS.
I know. I was thinking, like, I agree with your viewpoint much more now, QP. Let's keep these versions independent. Okay. Well, for me, I don't know if anybody else has topics, but for me, I've accomplished everything that I wanted with this meeting.
This has been great and helpful for me, for what it's worth.
All right. So why don't we call it a day? Everybody, quick round of applause for Florian, who opened his first Rust PR, or at least that's how I interpreted what he sent along.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Woohoo!
Welcome.
My first code with Rust it was very complicated on my side because I'm more comfortable with Java, Scala, and Python, but feel free to share with me details regarding my pull request.
Well, welcome to the party.
Thank you.
Thank you for the pull request. And yeah, everybody, have a good day. Have a good week or so. The next time this is scheduled is 2 weeks from now at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream.